then hung up. The next day, I met Thomas in his office. It was quiet, calm, a stark contrast to the chaos running through my head. I handed him the documents Mark had left me, the contracts, the partnership agreements, everything. He skimmed through them quickly, his eyes narrowing as he flipped through the pages. "You weren't kidding when you said this is bigger than you thought," he said, putting the papers down. "These aren't just business deals. This is a network of investors, corrupt officials, and people who pull strings from the shadows. Whoever's running this is covering their tracks well." I nodded. "I know. I've been trying to make sense of it, but every time I think I'm close, I get pulled back in deeper. Harbinger, Victor Wells, they're all connected, but I don't know how." Thomas sighed and looked at me. "We need to expose this, Chris. We need to get this in front of the right authorities, but we have to be careful. Harbinger's reach is long. The minute we make a move, you'll be their target. You have to decide if you're ready to go all in on this." "Are you?" I didn't hesitate. "I have no choice now. I'm already in." He nodded. "All right. I'll get these documents to the right people. But you need to stay low, keep your head down, keep moving. They won't stop looking for you." I left his office with a sense of purpose. It was time to go on the offensive. I wasn't just going to sit back and wait to be crushed by a system I couldn't understand. I was going to expose it, no matter the cost. But the deeper I got, the more I realized Harbinger was only the tip of the iceberg. The people behind it were more powerful, more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. And now the game had truly begun. Days passed in a blur after my meeting with Thomas. The weight of what I had learned, the connections, the vast network behind Mark's death, and the dangerous players involved, crushed me. Every phone call, every passing car felt like someone was watching me. I couldn't trust anyone, not even the people I thought I could. Every whisper in the street, every shadow I passed felt like a threat. Harbinger wasn't going to let me walk away from this. I kept my head low, following the steps Thomas outlined for me. He had already sent the documents to the right authorities. Someone who could, in theory, expose the network. But that didn't mean I was out of danger. The clock was ticking. The longer it took for the truth to come out, the more likely it was that Harbinger would find me. I couldn't just sit around waiting for someone to come and rescue me. No, I had to make a move. I had to be proactive, not reactive. And as much as I hated it, there was only one way to get answers. I had to confront them, Harbinger. I spent the next few days preparing. I couldn't go into this blind. I started tracking down any information I could find about Harbinger. Every lead, every whisper, every piece of the puzzle I could connect. The deeper I dug, the clearer it became that Harbinger was everywhere. The network was vast, spanning multiple countries with ties to major players in business, government, and even law enforcement. There were people who had been in the game for decades, and people who had been swallowed up by it, just like Mark had been. I found a pattern in the names that kept coming up. Connections to high-profile investors who operated under the radar, international dealings that left no paper trail, and most of all, Victor Wells, the one man who seemed to know everything. He wasn't just some small-time player. He was a key figure in this world, and I had to find him if I was going to survive. Finally tracked down a lead on Victor, a former business associate of his who had been tangled up with him years ago in a different investment. The man's name was Marcus, and he was hiding out in a low-rent hotel on the other side of town. He wasn't answering his phone, but I knew if I went there in person, I might get the answers I needed. When I arrived at the hotel, the place was quiet. Too quiet. The worn, old building was on the verge of collapse, and the flickering neon light in the lobby did nothing to make it look any less grim. I knew I was taking a huge risk by going there, but if I didn't find Marcus, I would never get closer to Victor, and I needed to know everything. I took the elevator up to the third floor and walked to room 312, where Marcus had been living for the past few months. As I stood outside his door, I heard movement inside. Someone was there. I knocked once, hard. "Marcus," I called out. "It's Chris Turner. We need to talk." There was silence, then a faint shuffle of feet. Finally, the door cracked open, revealing a disheveled man in his late 40s, eyes wide with suspicion. "Who the hell are you?" he asked, his voice rough, as if he hadn't used it in days. I'm looking for information on Victor Wells, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. You know him, right? I need answers about what happened to Mark. Marcus's face twisted, in a grimace. Victor, you're asking the wrong guy, pal. That's one man I wish I never met. I don't have time for games, I said, pushing past him into the room. I'm not here for small talk. What's going on with Harbinger? Why did they kill Mark? Marcus backed up, his hands raised in a defensive gesture. You don't understand. They're not just a group of investors, man. They're an empire. The whole thing is built on lies, secrets, and manipulation. No one gets out once they're in. Mark tried, and look where it got him. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. Tell me what happened to him. Marcus hesitated, his eyes darting nervously. I don't know everything, but I can tell you this. Harbinger has no mercy. They don't kill to make a point, they kill to maintain control. Mark wasn't just a liability, he knew too much, and he was planning to expose them. But what Mark didn't realize was that there's no such thing as walking away from these people. The moment you get involved with them, they own you. I couldn't process what I was hearing. Mark had been planning to expose them, to take them down. But how had he thought he could escape something this powerful? How had I gotten so deep into it without realizing the full danger? Why didn't you tell me all of this before? I demanded. I didn't want to get involved, Marcus replied, his voice shaking. I had my own reasons for staying out of it. But now you're here and I can't keep pretending I don't know anything. You're not safe, Chris. The moment you started looking into Mark's death, you became a target. I've seen what they do to people who try to betray them. They'll come after you next, and they won't stop until you're gone. I stood there, frozen for a moment. The walls felt like they were closing in around me. I had known that Harbinger was dangerous, but now I understood the full extent of their power. This wasn't just about business deals. It wasn't just about money. It was about control. And once they had you, there was no escaping. I had to make a choice. I had to decide whether I was going to keep fighting or whether I was going to let them win. We have one shot at this, Marcus said, his voice serious. If you want answers, if you want to survive, you need to take down Harbinger from the inside. But it won't be easy, and it won't be clean. I looked at him, the weight of everything pressing on my chest. I had come too far to back out now. Mark had been killed because he knew too much. But now I was the one who knew the secrets. I had to finish what Mark had started. It was the first time in weeks that I felt like I was in control. Not completely. No, not yet. But for the first time, I had a plan. I knew what I needed to do. The path forward was dangerous, but it was the only way out. Victor Wells, Harbinger, Mark's death, it had all led me here. Everything Mark had tried to uncover, everything he had failed to escape now rested in my hands. And the worst part was, I wasn't sure if I was playing to win or just playing to survive. But in a world where everyone's motives were hidden, behind layers of lies, survival became the game itself. Okay, Marcus, I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. Tell me what I need to do next. I'm done waiting. He looked at me, his face taut with fear and exhaustion. You want to go after them? Fine. But know this. You'll be up against people who will do anything to protect themselves. People with resources, connections, and a ruthless streak. Harbinger isn't just an organization. It's a network of power that touches everything. You can't trust anyone who's ever been involved. Everyone has a price. I nodded. I had already learned that lesson the hard way. I don't need to trust anyone, I just need to take them down. Marcus ran a hand through his hair, looking conflicted. Listen, Chris, if you go in full throttle, they'll know. They'll come for you. But there's another way. An insider. Someone on the inside of Harbinger who might be able to help. If you can get to them, you might just have a fighting chance. I raised an eyebrow. Who, and how do I get to them? He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a whisper. His name is Garrett Cole. He's a senior executive at Harbinger. You won't find him on any lists, and he doesn't advertise his connections, but he's been playing the game just like Mark. He knows things, Chris, big things. But he's smart. He'll only help you if he believes you can pull this off, and getting to him won't be easy. Where do I find him? I asked, already feeling the weight of the task ahead. He'll be at a gala in 2 nights, Marcus replied, his face tight with tension. It's an invite-only event, a fundraiser for some charity Harbinger sponsors. He'll be there, surrounded by people he trusts. If you want him, that's your shot. The idea of attending a lavish event filled with people who could very well be connected to Harbinger made my stomach churn. But it was my only chance. The gala wasn't just a social gathering. It was a hub for the elite, the power players, who ran this game. If I could get to Garrett Cole, I might be able to strike a deal, or at least gain the information I needed. I didn't have the luxury of waiting for a better plan. I had to move fast. 2 nights later, I stood at the entrance of the grand ballroom, surrounded by the kind of opulence I'd only seen in movies. The gala was being held at one of the most luxurious venues in the city, a towering building with gold-framed windows and marble floors. The guests were dressed in their finest suits and gowns, mingling with drinks in hand, as if they were untouchable, above the laws of men. I, on the other hand, felt like a wolf among sheep. I had borrowed a tuxedo, an ill-fitting one, but it worked, and walked through the doors with my heart pounding. My eyes scanned the room, taking in every face, every movement. There were businessmen, politicians, people with too much money and too little morality. But somewhere in this sea of wealth and power, Garrett Cole was here. And he was my ticket. I navigated the crowd, making my way toward the bar where the staff were serving drinks. It was a calculated move. Blend in, make a good impression, and wait for the right moment. I didn't want to rush this. If I was going to get close to Garrett, I had to play it smart. I ordered a drink and found a spot near the edge of the crowd, watching. It wasn't long before I spotted him. A tall, clean-shaven man in a perfectly tailored suit, standing near a group of well-dressed men. His posture was relaxed, but his eyes, sharp, calculating, were scanning the room, much like mine. He was waiting for someone. I took a deep breath. This was it. The clock was ticking. I approached, weaving through the crowd until I was just a few feet away. I cleared my throat and his eyes flicked to mine, studying me for a moment. "Garrett Cole, I presume," I said, my voice steady. He didn't flinch. "Who's asking?" His tone was guarded but not unfriendly. I didn't give him time to think. I reached into my jacket pocket, pulling out the small envelope that had been handed to me earlier. Inside it, the documents that linked Harbinger to every shady deal Mark had ever uncovered. "This is for you," I said, holding the envelope out. "I think it's time we had a talk." His eyes narrowed as he looked at the envelope, then back at me. For a moment I thought he might refuse, might even walk away, but instead he took the envelope with a small, almost imperceptible smile. "Follow me," he said quietly, his voice barely audible over the noise of the gala. Without another word, he led me through the crowd, his presence commanding attention as we made our way toward a private room off to the side. Once inside, Garrett closed the door behind us, and I knew that this was the moment. There was no going back now. "All right, Chris," Garrett said, his voice calm but tinged with curiosity. "Let's see what you've got." I took a deep breath and handed him the documents. "I know about Harbinger, I know about Mark's death, and I know that you've been a part of all of it." Garrett studied the papers for a moment before setting them down on the table. "You're in deeper than you realize, Chris," he said, his voice low. "But I can help you. If you're serious about taking Harbinger down, you'll need more than just documents. You'll need muscle, information, and timing." I leaned forward, locking eyes with him. "Then let's get started." Garrett's expression softened just a fraction, but there was no mistaking the weight behind his words. He wasn't just a part of Harbinger. He had been deep inside, and now, somehow, he was willing to help me. It was a gamble, one I couldn't afford to lose. "You want to take down Harbinger," Garrett said, sitting down across from me. "But before we do anything, I need to know you're serious. This is bigger than anything you've dealt with so far. If we move on them, there's no turning back." I nodded, feeling the gravity of his words. I had already seen how far they were willing to go to eliminate anyone who got in their way. Mark was dead. People had vanished. I couldn't back down now. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about stopping an empire of corruption, about putting an end to the power they held over people like me, people who thought they had no options left. "I'm ready," I said, my voice steady. I didn't get this far to back out now. Garrett eyed me for a long moment before leaning forward, tapping the envelope I'd given him on the table. All right, Chris, but understand this. Harbinger is built on secrecy. They have eyes everywhere. You think you've been playing a game of chess with them? They're already 3 moves ahead. That's how they stay in control. Mark tried to play their game, and it cost him his life. You're not just up against the organization. You're up against the people who run it. I clenched my fists, feeling the surge of anger building again. But this time it was different. I wasn't just reacting to the injustice. I was calculating my next move. You've been part of Harbinger for a long time, I said, my voice low. What's your angle, Garrett? Why are you helping me? He sighed, leaning back in his chair. I've been a part of Harbinger long enough to see how the system works. I've played by their rules, watched them destroy lives, and I've always been just close enough to the core to see it. But lately, something changed. They're getting too ambitious, too reckless. Mark wasn't just a casualty. He was a signal that something inside is starting to break. Harbinger is unraveling. Why now? I asked. Why are you helping me now after all this time? Garrett's eyes hardened. Because I can't stand by and watch them destroy more lives. They've been playing a dangerous game with too many people, Chris. It's time someone fought back, and you've got the documents to expose them. We can't let them get away with it. It's time to play them at their own game. I wasn't sure if I fully trusted Garrett yet, but the look in his eyes told me he was telling the truth. He wasn't just helping me out of some misguided sense of loyalty. He had his own reasons for wanting to see Harbinger brought down. All right, I said, standing up and taking a step closer to him. What's the plan? How do we take them down? Garrett pushed a stack of papers toward me. First, we take out their finances. Harbinger's operations run on money. They've infiltrated every industry they can, but their wealth is concentrated in a few places. If we can cut them off financially, they'll lose their leverage. The documents you gave me, those will be the first step, but we need more than just paperwork. We need a full-scale assault. I felt my pulse quicken. This was real now. We weren't just talking about exposing them. We were talking about dismantling everything Harbinger had built. I have a contact, Garrett continued. He's a hacker who's been working on getting us inside their systems. Once we have access to their accounts, their offshore dealings, everything, we can start pulling the pieces apart. But we have to move fast. The longer we wait, the harder. It's going to be to stay ahead of them. I nodded, already thinking ahead. And what about Victor Wells? If I'm going after him, I need more than just these documents. I need to know where he is, what he's planning. Garrett's lips curled into a thin smile. Victor Wells, you're thinking too small. Harbinger doesn't just rely on a single person. Victor's a player, sure, but he's not the one pulling all the strings. You need to focus on the people who make the decisions, the board. They're the ones who have been running this operation for years, and they've always stayed in the shadows. That's where the real power is. If you want to take down Harbinger, you need to expose the board. I felt the weight of that statement settle over me. The board. They were the ones who had orchestrated everything. They were the ones who controlled everything, and they had been playing the game for far too long. But now it was my turn. My turn to take control of the game, and I was going to make sure I didn't lose. I'll do whatever it takes, I said. But I need to find out where they are, who they are. Garrett nodded, pushing a file toward me. Everything you need is in here. The contacts, the locations, the names. But understand this. Once you make this move, there's no going back. Harbinger will come for you. They'll use everything they've got to stop you. And if you don't play this right, they'll make sure you're gone. For good. I took the file from him, my hands shaking only slightly. There was no going back. Now, the pieces were in motion, and I wasn't about to let them fall apart. You'll be with me every step of the way? I asked, looking at Garrett. He met my gaze steadily. We're in this together now. You won't be alone. I looked down at the file in my hands, knowing that the next few days would be the most dangerous of my life. I had no illusions. The stakes were higher than ever, and the risks were enormous. But the truth had to come out. I owed it to Mark and to myself to make sure that Harbinger's reign of power ended. The night before the plan was set in motion, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, my mind raced through the steps we needed to take to bring Harbinger down. I could feel the weight of the decisions pressing down on me. Every move, every second counted. We had the names, the contacts, and now we had to use them to strike. Garrett had arranged for us to meet with his hacker contact, a tech expert who went by the name Maverick. He was a ghost. No social media presence, no connections that could be traced back to him. All I knew was that he had the skills to infiltrate the kind of networks Harbinger had hidden behind for years. If we were going to expose them, we needed him on our side. We met in an underground parking garage, a place no one would expect, where no one would hear us. Maverick was waiting for us in an unmarked van, the faint glow of monitors illuminating his face as he typed furiously on a laptop. "Chris," Maverick said without looking up, his voice cool and detached. "Garrett tells me you're the guy who wants to take down Harbinger. You've got guts or you're crazy. Either way, you're going to need more than just these documents to pull it off." I could feel the heat of the situation intensifying. "We have to get into their system. Maverick, we need access to their accounts, their dealings, their entire network. We need proof of everything. I can't expose them without it." He turned to face me then, his eyes scanning me with a sharp, calculating gaze. "I can get you in. But this isn't going to be easy. Harbinger's not stupid. Their firewalls are the best money can buy. You're not just hacking a company's financials, you're cracking open a vault full of secrets. And if you trigger the wrong alarm, they'll know. And then we'll have an army on our tails." I felt the cold weight of his words settle into my chest. "We don't have a choice," I said, my voice firm. "We go in tomorrow, we move fast, we expose them, and we make sure the world knows what they're doing." Garrett was standing in the shadows, his arms crossed, watching the exchange between me and Maverick. "You have no idea what you're up against, Chris," he said, his voice low. "We're not just fighting an organization. We're fighting an empire. These people have been untouchable for decades. If we fail, they'll make sure none of us see tomorrow." I looked at him, the determination in my chest igniting. "Then we can't fail." Maverick finally broke his silence, letting out a breath. "All right. You want to burn down a house of lies? Let's burn it to the ground." The next day, everything went into motion. Maverick had set up the system for us to access Harbinger's networks. It wasn't going to be pretty and it wasn't going to be quiet, but we were ready. The first step was getting access to their main database, every account, every transaction, every person involved. I watched as Maverick typed in code after code, bypassing layers of encryption and firewalls, his eyes scanning the screen for any signs of detection. He had done this before. I had to trust him. 5 minutes, Maverick said, his fingers flying over the keyboard. "Stay sharp." I paced back and forth, my heart pounding in my chest. Garrett was already making calls, setting up the next phase. If Maverick could crack the system, we'd have everything we needed. But I could feel the clock ticking. Every minute we spent in this underground van was another minute that Harbinger's people could be closing in on us. I had no illusions about how this would end. We were going to have to move fast, and we were going to have to be ruthless. Suddenly, Maverick froze. His fingers hovered above the keyboard. "We've got company," he muttered, his voice tight. "I just got an alert. Someone's onto us." I felt the blood drain from my face. "How long do we have?" Maverick didn't answer. He just slammed his fingers back down on the keys, working faster than ever. The screen flashed red as he battled against whatever countermeasures Harbinger's people had set in place. I could hear the hum of the building's ventilation system, the muffled sound of cars outside. But in that moment, the only sound I cared about was Maverick's rapid typing. "Hold them off," he growled. "I need 2 more minutes." Garrett didn't need to be told twice. He stepped toward the door, his hand hovering over the lock. "We need to move now. We're not going to get another shot at this." I looked at Maverick. "Can you do it?" "Just get ready to run," Maverick snapped back, not looking up. "I'll finish it when I finish it." Minutes passed. Each one felt like an eternity. And then finally, Maverick spoke. "It's done. I've got everything we need." I couldn't believe it. My heart pounded as I looked over his shoulder, seeing the files, the full extent of Harbinger's operations laid out in front of us. Every illicit deal, every under-the-table transaction, every illegal activity they had ever been involved in was now in my hands. "We're done here," Maverick said, slamming the laptop shut. Let's go. Garrett didn't hesitate. He swung the van door open and we all piled out, running into the street. We were on the move now, heading toward a safe location where we could store the data, secure it, and send it to the authorities. But the moment we hit the street, we were not alone. Several cars screeched to a halt, blocking our path. Harbinger's men. We had made it this far, but now we were caught. Garrett pulled out a gun, motioning for us to move. This is it. You're in the final stretch, Chris. I knew then that there was no going back. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to run from this anymore. The final move had been made. The only question left was whether I'd survive long. Enough to see it through. The screeching of tires was the only sound I could focus on. My heart was pounding in my chest as the cold rush of reality hit me. The moment I'd feared was here. Harbinger's men had arrived, and we were trapped. I knew I had no time to second-guess myself. Garrett's eyes met mine, sharp and unwavering, as he motioned for us to stay low. Move, he ordered, his voice low but commanding. We ducked behind a row of parked cars, each one feeling like it might be our last cover. Where's the exit? I hissed, my eyes scanning the dark streets. There were no easy routes now. Harbinger had us cornered. They had us outnumbered, and, in a situation like this, survival wasn't guaranteed. But it wasn't just about making it out. It was about getting the data into the right hands and making sure the world knew what Harbinger had been hiding. Mark's death hadn't been in vain, not if I had anything to do with it. There's a back alley, Garrett said through gritted teeth. We'll head toward the abandoned building at the end of the block. It's our only shot. We took off running, adrenaline pushing our legs to move faster. The sound of footsteps and shouts echoed behind us, and I could feel Harbinger's men closing in, but we had a few seconds of lead. That was all I needed. We turned the corner and ducked into a narrow alley, the shadows swallowing us as we ran. I could hear the sound of sirens in the distance, but I knew that wouldn't save us. Harbinger had a way of making people disappear, even in plain sight. They weren't afraid to make things messy if it meant keeping their empire intact. The alley was a dead end, and the only option was to keep running toward the building Garrett had pointed out. As we approached, I heard a loud crash. A window, being thrown open from above. Someone had reached us before we could make our move. Up here, a voice shouted. I looked up to see Maverick's face peering down from a third-story window of the building. His fingers were gripping the edge of the frame, his face tense with urgency. Come on, I've got a way out. Without a second thought, we scrambled up the fire escape ladder, each of us moving faster than I thought possible, driven by fear and the knowledge that our time was running out. Harbinger's men were already on their way, and there was no more room for hesitation. We reached the rooftop, and Maverick led us across the flat expanse of concrete. From here, I could see everything. The city spread out beneath us, the streets alive with movement. But it wasn't the city I cared about anymore. It was the fight I was in. The fight to expose Harbinger, to bring everything into the light. Before it was too late. We're almost there, Maverick said, his voice tight with strain. He was clearly trying to stay ahead of the panic creeping into his own mind. But this wasn't just about him. It was about all of us now. As we moved across the rooftop, I heard the sound of helicopters approaching. I couldn't see them yet, but I knew what it meant. Harbinger had already made their move. They knew we had the data. They knew we were trying to expose them. I turned to Garrett, my eyes filled with determination. It's now or never. We can't let them get to us. Garrett's gaze locked onto mine. We're close. We've got the advantage for now, but we need to get that data out now. Maverick, can you upload it? Maverick gave a sharp nod, pulling out a small device from his jacket. Already on it, he began typing rapidly, connecting the files to a secure network that would send everything to the authorities. The world would know what Harbinger had done, who they were, every illegal transaction, every shady deal, every cover-up. It was all going public and nothing could stop it. But as the seconds ticked by, the sound of the helicopters grew louder. I knew Harbinger wasn't just going to let us slip away. They wouldn't let this data get out. Not without a fight. Done, Maverick said, his voice a quiet triumph. Before I could process the relief I felt, there was a sudden burst of gunfire. We ducked instinctively, but the shots were close. Too close. Harbinger had found us, and they weren't going to stop until we were dead. I didn't think. I acted. I grabbed Garrett and pulled him behind a nearby air vent, just as more gunfire ripped through the night air. Maverick followed close behind. We were pinned down, but at least we had the upper hand for now. The data was safe, but we were still in danger. The real fight was just beginning. I could hear the voices of Harbinger's men getting closer, their footsteps pounding on the rooftop. They were coming for us, and it wasn't just a few of them anymore. They had an army. We need to move, I said through clenched teeth. We can't stay here. Garrett nodded, pulling out a gun from his waistband. I'll cover you. Go. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. We needed to get out of here, and fast. We had the data. We had the proof. But it didn't matter if we didn't make it out alive. We sprinted across the rooftop, weaving between the vents and obstacles. I could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on me. I was no longer just running from Harbinger. I was running to make sure everything I had done meant something, to make sure Mark's death wasn't in vain. The sound of helicopters grew louder. They were getting closer. We were almost out of time. And then, in that moment, I saw it. A helicopter, hovering just above the building, lowering a rope ladder. "Maverick," I shouted, "get the rope." He didn't hesitate. In one smooth motion, Maverick grabbed the rope ladder and threw it over the side of the building. We were almost there. We reached the ladder just as the first of Harbinger's men appeared on the rooftop. Gunfire erupted again, but we were already climbing, pulling ourselves toward the helicopter. "Go, go, go!" Garrett yelled as we scrambled up the ladder, adrenaline fueling our every move. The helicopter blades whipped the air as we climbed higher, the city fading beneath us. But there was no time for relief. Harbinger wouldn't stop hunting us, they'd never stop. But as the helicopter lifted off, carrying us away from the chaos, I knew one thing for sure. We had won. We had the data. We had the proof. And the world would never be the same. The roar of the helicopter blades was deafening as we soared through the night sky, leaving the chaos of the city behind us. For the first time in what felt like forever, I allowed myself a moment of relief. We had made Harbinger's empire. The dangerous game they had played for years was exposed. The data was out there now, in the hands of the authorities and journalists who could finally shine a light on the darkest corners of the business world. But the relief was fleeting. I knew that this was just the beginning. Harbinger wasn't going to let this go quietly. They would come after us with everything they had left. But for now, we were one step ahead. Garrett sat beside me in the helicopter, his eyes scanning the horizon. He had been quiet ever since we made it aboard, and I could sense the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on him too. He had been part of the system, and now he was watching it all crumble. Maverick was on the other side of the cabin, tapping away on his laptop, no doubt making sure that the data was safely uploaded and that no one could intercept it. "How long do we have?" I asked Garrett, breaking the silence. He turned to me, his eyes weary but resolute. "Not long. Harbinger doesn't give up easily. They'll come for us, and they'll come fast. But for now, we've done what we set out to do. The data's out. The truth is out. They can't hide from this anymore." I nodded, though the feeling in my gut told me that the battle wasn't over. The storm wasn't just weathered, it was just beginning. But knowing that Harbinger's secrets were now exposed, that Mark's death wasn't in vain, that gave me a sense of purpose I hadn't had before. We flew for what felt like hours, finally touching down in a remote location. Garrett's contacts had arranged for us to stay off the grid for a while, keeping us safe while the authorities took action. We needed to disappear for a while, regroup, and figure out what our next move would be. Harbinger would be hunting us, yes, but now we had leverage. The world knew who they were, and we weren't the only ones after them. As the helicopter landed, Maverick turned off his laptop and joined us. "We've done it," he said, a rare moment of satisfaction in his usually impassive demeanor. "The data's secure, it's out there, they can't erase it now." Garrett gave a curt nod. "We can rest for now, but we have to keep our guard up. Harbinger won't go down without a fight, and neither will their allies." I looked at the two of them, both of them having taken risks far greater than I could ever imagine. They had both been through their own wars, their own struggles, and now we were in this together. They had helped me make it this far, And we weren't finished yet. We've won this round, I said, trying to shake off the lingering weight of uncertainty. But we still need to make sure it sticks. Harbinger won't go quietly. Garrett exhaled, then smiled, though it was a hard, worn smile. You're right, but we've already exposed them. The truth is out there, and it's only a matter of time before the world catches up. They'll have to answer for what they've done. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to be done. The fight had been won, but the war had only just begun. We had exposed Harbinger's dark secrets, but I knew there were others just like them. People who thrived in the shadows, pulling the strings, controlling the systems we relied on. Harbinger was just the tip of the iceberg. But for now, we had one victory to hold on to. The truth was no longer buried. Mark's death wasn't just a tragedy. It was the catalyst that set everything in motion. We had taken down the people who thought they were untouchable, and now the world would know who they were. Do you think they'll come for us? Maverick asked, breaking my thoughts. His eyes were fixed on the horizon, a subtle tension in his posture. I paused before answering. Yes, but we're ready for them. We've exposed them for who they really are, and that means they can't hide anymore. We stood together in the silence of the new dawn, knowing that our lives would never be the same. But as the sun began to rise, casting its golden light over the world, I felt something stir inside me that I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. I was no longer a pawn. I was no longer a victim. I had taken control of my fate, and I wasn't about to let it slip away.